Having a conversation here with Decorah School Superintendent Tim Cronin at a special board meeting on Monday afternoon. The Decorah School District has voted to pass a resolution authorizing Tim to seek mediation in connection to the denial of the district's application to join the Upper Iowa Conference in 2025-2026. I've given the big picture lay down on that end of things. Give us the layperson explanation of what the board action actually did on Monday.
Yeah, so this is a step or formality in the process, so that the next step will be we'll work with our attorney and draft a letter requesting mediation with Director of the Department of Education, which is Dr. Mackenzie Snow, and we'll lay out a little bit of our case in the request letter, but we'll request mediation, and that'll start a timeline of events. And I don't have this process memorized, but then mediation, we're asking for mediation on what we've been denied entry into the Upper Iowa Conference. And that's probably a key thing to recognize is you're only allowed to ask for mediation on something you've been rejected on. We, as we talked about in the board meeting, we can't ask for mediation of something that we didn't apply to or get rejected from. And so the Department of Ed then will work with the Girls Union and the Boys Association and get representatives and get on a calendar. And then we'll have a day of mediation where the Decorah School District representation, Upper Iowa Conference, and their representation get together and meet, talk about our request and mediate the request in kind of a face-to-face setting. One of the things that, and I've only been through this process once, but one of the things I know is that as part of mediation, if we can't agree, that then the state will issue their guidelines. But part of any mediation, I guess I've been involved in more mediations, and part of any type of mediation, you want to try to get the parties to agree to some kind of compromise or some kind of working arrangement. You do that with negotiations with teachers if you get that far. With regards to schools entering into a conference, I'm sure there'll be some kind of is there a compromise or can we agree to this? But if in the event that all the parties can't come to an agreement, then the state will say, well, this is how it's going to be. And one of the things that happens then is whatever the state puts together, there's usually a moratorium on any kind of changes. So the one I was familiar with was the Tri-Rivers Big East in 2012, and a couple schools left the Tri-Rivers, but a couple more wanted to come in, and they went to mediation, and the state came in and said, okay, these are all the schools in the Tri-Rivers Conference, and nobody leaves for 4 years or whatever amount of time it is. So that's one of the reasons you want to try to avoid mediation, is then there might be a school stuck in a conference that they don't feel good about. But so that's the process. I've been asked, well, can the mediators do anything they want? Well, sure, they can do anything they want, and again, if you look back at what the Tri-Rivers did, that was a kind of a mediation for Big East schools getting into the Tri-Rivers. And out of that, they made a new conference. I think that's how the River Valley Conference got made, if I remember correctly. So that was a fun research for me to read, because Anamosa was kind of surprised. They didn't even realize that a dispute about Clinton Prince of Peace being in the Tri-Rivers would impact Anamosa. But when the state looked at it, they kind of did a bigger move around of pieces and said, wait a minute, we need to make a new conference with some of the bigger schools in the Tri-Rivers. We're going to grab some schools here and put them together. I'm not implying that will happen in this process, but this is what happens when you go to mediation. You don't know what the outcome will be.
You said you've only been through this once, but that's once more than a lot of people in education in the state of Iowa.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you this way. What I'm reading between the lines based on your statement, the state would rather have all parties get together and say, hey, this can happen, and we agree to this, rather than them dictating something happen. Is that a fair way to put it?
That is a great way to put it. And I would say not just for athletic conferences, I've been in mediation with bargaining with teachers, and uh, there's always a desire to have, whether it's 100% perfect solution for everybody or maybe a 95, you always want the groups to agree to an agreement that isn't a binding kind of forced on mediation agreement.
And related to the Decorah district, did you feel there's any other option at this point related to conference affiliation for 25-26 other than what you passed on Monday?
Well, we just passed to go to mediation. We've had that discussion in the past about what makes sense, and I'd refer back to the January 31st board meeting that we spent a good hour talking about it. And Mr. Riley kind of broke down surveys from coaches, and not every coach would agree on the Upper Iowa, but a majority wanted the Upper Iowa. And it gets really down to me, what's the best interest of students? The factor I have to think about is travel, and the other conferences we've that would maybe fit us more population wise is the WAMAC, but the travel distance I think is 104, an average 104 miles to every competition, and it's under 40 for Upper Iowa. So just understanding that, yeah, we talked about we had applied to the Upper Iowa, we'd been denied. We're going to mediate that. Previously, as a district, we've talked about other options, but the Upper Iowa fit for lots of reasons, but a lot of them are, those traditional rivalries and the travel distance. And I think about Tuesdays in January when maybe the weather isn't the best. I'd much rather have students on a bus to Crestwood than I would have them on a bus to Grinnell.
Do you feel the district has been as open and as transparent about this process as you possibly could be?
Oh, sure. There's always parts, people want to know everything, and there's parts, you got to respect the fact that you're working with other school districts and other superintendents and other boards. And um, I think we've been as open and honest, and we've tried to do everything, anytime we do a motion, we do it at a board meeting. There are lots of conversations going on. I can't tell you about what every other conversation is that maybe other districts are having, but there's occasionally we'll have a conversation with somebody and they'll say, hey, haven't talked to my board about this. And so we always respect that as part of the process as well.
And looking at where everything is when it comes to current Northeast Iowa Conference schools. Today, you've got Decorah applying for mediation related to their Upper Iowa Conference application. You also have Charles City that has applied for mediation through their North Central Conference application, and Waverly Shellrock, who has applied for mediation related to their WAMAC application. Are those three, could they be related in any how, or will the Department of Education, the Boys Association, and the Girls Union look at those three issues separately?
Well, they should look at them separately. Now, your question is a little bit of what could the Department of Ed do? And that's where you get into this speculative realm of I'm not going to hazard a guess.
Mhm.
I think that's probably for two guys sitting around, sports experts on a podcast, to speculate on what the Department of Ed might do. But understanding nobody knows. That's the whole part. You give up your power when you can't agree to things through just face to face, and you have to get a mediator, and you do lose a certain amount of control, and not just for Decorah, but for everybody else about what the state could do. If the state looks at it, and maybe the state does say, gosh, we've got these three mediations going on with schools that used to be in the Northeast Iowa, let's be creative with the solution. But I being as that's the big unknown on what if anything could happen through mediation, other than we know we're mediating our request to the Upper Iowa. That's what I know. But speculating on what the state could do with it all, I wouldn't want to hazard a guess either way.
Again, this is a little bit of me reading between the lines, but back in January, your original request to the Upper Iowa Conference was to just sit down and have a meeting with the conference. That request ended up being denied. Does basically mediation with the UIC allow that meeting that you requested a couple of months ago to happen?
Well, Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think we were looking at just having a discussion with the Upper Iowa and kind of discussing about, how we needed to be in a conference, how we understood that we would be the biggest, largest school, but the schools we just played are were on the cusp of joining the Upper Iowa, and talking through what might be a solution that would at least be okay for people. Um, this will be more, the mediation is now we've gotten to, we're just requesting to join the Upper Iowa. And so we're probably having less of a conversation about logistics and more of a conversation about membership or not. Now, that could certainly be part of the mediation process, where if you get in there and they say, well, it will only work for us if we do this, then maybe you are having that conversation that we asked for back in January. But no, this is kind of a different thing. We're asking to be in the conference. We're not asking to talk about what the conference could be like if we were involved in it.
And I know you kind of touched on this based on my first question, but what type of timetable is this on? And the fact that you're dealing with three mediations in our immediate area, does that
Yeah.
slow down this timetable at all?
Well, that's all up to the state, and it's all about them getting together with their folks. But we'll get our application, now that we've got a board approval, to the state later this week, I assume. And we're working with an attorney on that. And then I think that starts out a timeline. I don't have these timelines memorized. I think that might be up for Mr. Riley, but if there's like a 60-day answer, but we'll get in the queue of the schedule. And I just know when you're trying to schedule something, and it's involving multiple school districts and multiple people. I mean, you've got to have somebody from the girls union, the boys association, and the Department of Ed. And maybe from there, once those three people can meet on a certain day, maybe they just send it out and send us the date. We got a couple invitations the last time. I participated as when Waverly Shell Rock had mediation on the vote to remove them from the league, I guess. Um, and they just sent us out a date. I don't remember being asked, does this work? It was just kind of like, this is when we're doing it. So clear your calendar.
All right, Tim. Well, appreciate the information and the knowledge about the process. It's going to be an ongoing issue, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions on this front. We appreciate the time.
You bet.
Tim Cronin, Decorah School Superintendent.